Are the rich building homes in space to escape time itself? While you age another day on Earth, somewhere in orbit, time moves differently. Right now, billionaires aren't just racing to build space hotels and lunar colonies for the view. They're investing billions into something far more radical, a loophole in reality itself. Because here's what most people don't know. Time doesn't pass the same way everywhere in the universe. Einstein proved it over a century ago, but only now do we have the technology to exploit it. At higher altitudes, away from Earth's gravitational pull, time literally moves faster. It's not science fiction. It's measured, documented physics. Astronauts on the International Space Station age slightly slower than we do. The difference is microscopic now, but what happens when you push further out? What happens when you're not just visiting space, but living there? The ultra-wealthy are quietly funding research into habitats positioned at specific gravitational sweet spots, places where time dilation becomes significant. Imagine a home where you could live for decades while only years pass for those below, where aging slows to a crawl compared to the rest of humanity. This isn't about escaping Earth's problems. It's about escaping Earth's clock. The question isn't whether this is possible. Physicists already know it is. The question is, when the first orbital timekeepers open their doors, who gets inside? And what happens to a civilization when the richest among us begin to exist in a different timeline altogether? 1. Why billionaires are secretly financing space cities, and it's not just for Mars. They don't announce it on press conferences. They don't put it in headlines. But the biggest money on Earth is quietly moving upward, into space. While the world is distracted by rockets heading to Mars and flags planted on the Moon, a far more strategic plan is unfolding behind closed doors. Billionaires aren't just funding missions, they're financing entire cities beyond Earth. Not temporary stations, not short visits, but permanent structures designed for long-term human life in orbit. These aren't dreams. They're blueprints. Private companies backed by extreme wealth are pouring billions into orbital habitats, rotating space colonies, and artificial gravity living modules. Unlike government missions focused on exploration, these projects are built for stability, comfort, and continuity. Radiation shielding, psychological well-being, self-sustaining ecosystems. Every detail points to one goal: staying in space, not visiting it. And here's where the story changes. For the ultra-rich, space isn't just a destination. It's an environment where Earth's rules begin to weaken. Gravity behaves differently. Time moves differently. Even biology adapts. Scientists already know that astronauts in orbit age slightly slower due to relativistic effects. Over long periods, that difference becomes measurable. Small, but real. That realization has transformed space from a scientific frontier into a strategic one. These investments suggest that the wealthy are no longer thinking in years or decades, but in generations. Earth faces climate instability, resource strain, and geopolitical uncertainty. Space, on the other hand, offers control. Controlled gravity, controlled ecosystems, controlled timelines. Mars may capture public imagination, but orbital cities offer something far more practical: proximity to Earth, constant solar energy, and freedom from planetary limits. No storms, no borders, no nations, just engineered reality. This isn't escapism, it's positioning. History shows that elites always move first, into fortified cities, offshore havens, underground bunkers. Space is simply the next layer, a place where wealth doesn't just buy comfort, but options. And as these silent projects accelerate, one question becomes impossible to ignore. Are space cities being built for humanity's future, or for a select few determined to outgrow Earth itself? 2. Time dilation in space. Is living there a real way to slow down aging? Time doesn't flow the same everywhere, and space quietly proves it. High above Earth, astronauts circle the planet at nearly 28,000 kilometers per hour. Down here, clocks tick normally. Up there, they fall slightly out of sync. Not by minutes, not by hours, but by something far more unsettling. Proof that time itself can be bent. This isn't science fiction, it's physics. Einstein's theory of relativity shows that time slows down for objects moving at extreme speeds or existing in weaker gravity. In orbit, both conditions apply. The International Space Station experiences less gravity than Earth's surface and travels fast enough that astronauts aboard age milliseconds slower than people below. The difference is tiny, but real, measurable, and undeniable. And that tiny gap has massive implications. Scientists studying long-duration spaceflight have already observed unusual biological changes. Astronauts show shifts in gene expression, altered cellular repair, and differences in how the body handles aging at the molecular level. Muscles weaken, bones thin, but certain cellular processes appear to behave differently in microgravity. Time, at least biologically, doesn't play by familiar rules up there. Now stretch that reality beyond 6-month missions. Imagine decades spent in orbit. Years living in rotating habitats that simulate gravity while maintaining relativistic speed. Over time, the accumulated difference in aging becomes larger, still subtle, but enough to force a serious scientific question. Could extended life in space slightly extend human lifespan compared to life on Earth? Researchers are careful. No one is promising immortality, but the math doesn't lie. Time dilation isn't theoretical, it's already happening. GPS satellites must constantly correct for it, or navigation systems would fail. Space is literally a place where clocks run differently. For those planning permanent of-world living, this changes everything. Living in space may not dramatically stop aging, but it introduces a new variable humanity has never controlled before: the rate at which time is experienced. Even a small shift, compounded over generations, reshapes biology, society, and inequality. Because if time can be slowed, even slightly, the question isn't whether it works. The question is who gets access to it first. And in the silent laboratories of space science, that future is already being measured, 1 millisecond at a time. 3. Inside the ultra-rich space bunkers. What they're building beyond Earth. These aren't spacecraft designed to travel. They're structures designed to stay. Far beyond the atmosphere, a new kind of architecture is quietly taking shape. One that looks less like a space station and more like a sanctuary. Backed by enormous private wealth, engineers and futurists are designing of-world homes meant not for exploration, but for permanent survival beyond Earth. At the center of these designs are rotating space habitats, massive circular structures that spin slowly to create artificial gravity. This rotation allows residents to walk, sleep, and live in conditions that closely resemble Earth, reducing muscle loss and bone decay. For the ultra-rich, gravity isn't a luxury. It's a requirement for long-term living. Radiation is the next threat being engineered away. Beyond Earth's magnetic shield, cosmic radiation can damage DNA and accelerate aging. These space bunkers are built with layered shielding, water walls, and advanced materials that absorb and deflect harmful rays. Some concepts even use regolith, space dust, as natural armor. Protection is no longer optional, it's structural. But the most revealing detail isn't physical, it's psychological. Designers know that isolation breaks the human mind long before the body fails. So, these habitats include artificial day-night cycles, panoramic Earth views, indoor forests, and open communal spaces. Some even simulate weather patterns. This isn't survival minimalism, it's emotional engineering. Sustainability seals the intent. Closed-loop ecosystems recycle air, water, and waste. Algae farms generate oxygen. Solar arrays provide endless energy. Food is grown hydroponically. Once operational, these systems could function for years without Earth's support. Independence isn't a backup plan. It's the goal. Together, these features paint a clear picture. These are not temporary shelters for astronauts. They are self-contained lifeboats, capable of housing families, elites, and entire communities beyond the planet's reach. History offers a familiar pattern. When uncertainty rises, those with resources build fortresses. First castles, then bunkers, now space habitats. These structures suggest that some people aren't preparing to explore the future. They're preparing to outlive Earth's instability, and as construction accelerates in silence, one truth becomes impossible to ignore. The safest place for the future may no longer be on the ground beneath our feet, but in orbit above it. 4. Can wealth buy you a longer life by escaping Earth's time limits? Money has always bent the rules of survival. Now it may be approaching something far more powerful: the rules of time. On Earth, wealth already buys longer life. The richest people live years, sometimes decades longer than the average population. They have access to advanced medicine, early diagnostics, gene therapies, personalized nutrition, and technologies that slow aging at the cellular level. Longevity, for the elite, is already a competitive advantage. But space changes the equation. Beyond Earth's surface, time behaves differently. Relativity proves that motion and gravity affect how fast time passes. In orbit, clocks tick more slowly. Astronauts age slightly less than people on Earth, not symbolically but physically. The difference is small, yet scientifically undeniable. For researchers studying long-term of planet living, this introduces an unprecedented idea: longevity through location. If wealth grants access to permanent space habitats, places moving fast enough and experiencing weaker gravity, then aging itself becomes unevenly distributed. Not stopped, not reversed, but subtly slowed. Over years, those fractions of seconds accumulate. Over generations, they compound. This isn't about fantasy immortality. It's about marginal gains. And history shows that the wealthy understand marginal gains better than anyone. A few extra years of life, a few more productive decades, a biological edge amplified by technology and isolation from Earth's risks. Space also reduces exposure to certain planetary threats. No pollution, controlled environments, no pandemics spreading unchecked, no climate volatility. Life becomes engineered rather than endured. The body ages in a cleaner, more predictable system. Researchers are cautious, but the implications are impossible to ignore. If access to space becomes exclusive, then time itself becomes a luxury commodity. Aging no longer happens equally. Lifespans begin to diverge, not by genetics alone, but by altitude and velocity. Civilization has always drawn lines between classes, by wealth, power, and opportunity. Space introduces a new line, invisible but profound: the speed at which life passes. And if the future allows some people to step outside Earth's temporal limits, the greatest divide may no longer be money. It may be time itself. 5. The science of living in orbit. How space could warp time forever. Up in orbit, time doesn't just pass, it behaves differently. Every 90 minutes the sun rises and sets. Night becomes day. Day becomes night again. For humans living in orbit, the familiar rhythm that has guided biology for millions of years simply disappears. And as the body adapts to this strange environment, something deeper begins to shift: how time is experienced, processed, and even encoded at the cellular level. Orbiting Earth means traveling at extraordinary speeds. At roughly 28,000 kilometers per hour, astronauts are constantly moving fast enough for relativistic effects to take place. Time on board ticks slightly slower than it does on the planet below. The difference is subtle, but it's real, and when paired with long-term exposure, its consequences begin to compound. The human body responds immediately. Studies on astronauts reveal significant biological changes. Muscles regenerate differently. Bones lose density faster without constant load. But more intriguingly, DNA expression itself changes. Genes related to immune response, aging, and stress behave in unfamiliar ways. Some changes reverse after returning to Earth. Others linger, suggesting that orbital life leaves a lasting biological signature. The brain changes too. Extended time in microgravity alters spatial awareness, memory, and sensory processing. Astronauts report shifts in how they perceive motion and time. Days blur together. Months feel compressed. The mind begins to recalibrate its internal clock, not by choice, but by necessity. Then there's circadian disruption. Without a stable day-night cycle, sleep patterns fragment. Hormones tied to aging and repair fluctuate unpredictably. Over years, this disruption could permanently alter how the body measures time internally. Aging may no longer follow Earth's familiar pace. Scientists are beginning to ask serious questions, not about survival, but transformation. Long-term orbital living doesn't just challenge the body, it reshapes it. Time in space is not merely slower, it's experienced differently, biologically and psychologically. If humans one day spend entire lifetimes in orbit, they may emerge fundamentally changed, their bodies tuned to motion, their minds adapted to accelerated cycles, their aging governed by physics rather than planets. Space doesn't freeze time, it reprograms it. And as research continues, one truth becomes clear. Living in orbit may permanently redefine what it means to grow old as a human. 6. Hidden space colonies for the elite. Fact or conspiracy? Secrecy has always been the shadow of power, and nowhere is that shadow darker than in space. Beyond public launches and live-streamed rocket landings, a quieter narrative circulates. One built from whispers, leaked documents, and unanswered questions. Claims of hidden space colonies for the elite refuse to disappear, not because they are proven, but because the conditions that allow them to exist are very real. There are no confirmed elite-only colonies in orbit, no official records, no public admissions, yet speculation continues to grow, fueled by a simple fact. Most private aerospace funding operates behind closed doors. Black budget programs have existed for decades. Governments routinely classify advanced aerospace projects. Patents describing orbital habitats, autonomous space construction, and long-term of-world living systems are publicly available. Yet the timelines and full capabilities behind them remain opaque. When technologies appear on paper years before they surface publicly, questions naturally follow. Then there are the whistleblowers. Former engineers and defense insiders have claimed the existence of undisclosed orbital platforms, used for research, surveillance, or strategic advantage. None of these claims have been independently verified. But history offers an uncomfortable precedent. Many once dismissed programs, from stealth aircraft to global surveillance systems, later proved to be real. Private space changes the equation further. Unlike national agencies, billionaire-backed companies are not required to disclose full project details. Orbital infrastructure can be assembled quietly, component by component, under the banner of research or logistics. The line between a station and a settlement becomes thin and easily hidden behind technical language. This lack of transparency fuels suspicion. If space habitats are being built, who gets access first? Scientists? Governments? Or those who can afford privacy beyond Earth? Space is no longer just a scientific frontier, it's an economic one. And economics has never been equal. Still, caution matters. Extraordinary claims demand extraordinary evidence, and none has surfaced proving secret colonies designed exclusively for elites. But the absence of proof does not erase the unease created by silence. When investment flows are hidden and oversight is limited, imagination fills the gaps. The real issue may not be whether secret colonies exist, but why the question feels plausible at all. Because when humanity's next frontier is shaped in private, the future of space may not belong to everyone. It may belong to those who can afford to build beyond sight. and beyond accountability. 7. From sci-fi to reality. Are space homes the next luxury status symbol? Luxury has always moved upward. First in castles, then in skyscrapers, then beyond borders. Now it's looking beyond the planet. For decades, space homes existed only in science fiction. Sleek stations floating silently above Earth, reserved for distant futures. But that future is no longer theoretical. As technology accelerates and private capital pours in, the idea of living in space is shifting from survival necessity to ultimate status symbol. History reveals a clear pattern. Power doesn't just accumulate, it relocates. Private jets once marked the elite, followed by offshore islands, armored bunkers, and self-sustaining estates. Each step created distance, physical and symbolic, from the rest of society. Space residences represent the next escalation. Distance not just from people, but from the planet itself. Unlike early space stations built for research, emerging space habitats are designed with comfort in mind. Panoramic Earth views, artificial gravity, climate-controlled interiors, personalized living quarters. These aren't emergency shelters. They're expressions of privilege, engineered to signal access to a realm few can reach. Exclusivity transforms meaning. When only a select group can live beyond Earth, space becomes more than an address, it becomes identity. A marker of influence, foresight, and wealth. Ownership shifts from land to orbit, from territory to trajectory. This transition reshapes inequality. Access to space living isn't just about lifestyle. It alters exposure to risk. Those of planet may avoid climate disasters, pandemics, and geopolitical instability. Life becomes curated, protected, and controlled. Meanwhile, Earth remains shared and vulnerable. The cultural impact runs deeper. Space living challenges humanity's relationship with time. Orbit changes how days pass, how bodies age, how life is measured. For the elite, time itself may feel expanded, less urgent, less constrained by Earth's cycles. Luxury, in this sense, isn't just comfort, it's temporal freedom. Science fiction warned of this divide long before technology made it plausible. Floating cities above struggling planets, skybound elites detached from the ground below. Those stories now read less like imagination and more like rehearsal. As space homes edge closer to reality, the question isn't whether people will live there, it's whether space will become the ultimate symbol of separation, where the future is not only unevenly distributed, but physically elevated above the rest of humanity. Time has always been the great equalizer. No matter how rich or powerful someone became, everyone aged at the same pace, under the same sky. But that assumption is starting to crack. What was once the domain of equations and thought experiments is quietly becoming infrastructure, space cities, orbital habitats, artificial gravity homes. These aren't just technological achievements, they're decisions about the future of humanity. Decisions being made not by governments or civilizations, but by those with the wealth to move first. The science is clear. Time behaves differently beyond Earth. Biology adapts, aging shifts, and even small advantages, compounded over years and generations, reshape destinies. Space doesn't promise immortality, but it offers something just as powerful: distance from the clock that governs everyone else. History tells us where this leads. Every era has its escape routes for the elite: walled cities, distant colonies, underground bunkers. Space is simply the next frontier of separation. Higher, quieter, more exclusive. A place where problems can be avoided rather than solved, and where time itself becomes negotiable. The most unsettling part isn't the technology, it's the silence. No debates, no votes, no shared vision. Just quiet funding, private launches, and futures being built out of public sight. When humanity's next chapter is written beyond the planet, the question is no longer about rockets or physics, it's about access. Because if some people begin to live in a different relationship with time, aging slower, insulated from Earth's chaos, then civilization itself fractures, not by borders or wealth alone, but by timelines. So, as you watch the seconds pass on your screen, remember this: the future may already be happening somewhere above you. And the real question isn't whether humans will live in space, it's whether the future of time will belong to everyone, or only to those who can afford to leave the planet behind.